Good evening, guys. You're all welcome to NEET PG Live Daily. And today I will be discussing a few questions from the past entrance examination, like JIPMER PG entrance examination, May 2019. And this is an attempt or a step towards making you prepared for ANICET 2020, because this is, a new pattern based entrance examination which has amalgamated various institutes together. Otherwise, there was a separate provision for separate entrance examinations for many such institutes. So it becomes very difficult to understand whether what kind of question paper it could be, and there are many apprehensions and many confusions around this ANICET. But we should not forget, if a person is well prepared, let it be any kind of question paper, he will definitely make it, make it to the success. Most importantly is you should not get confused, or you should not be afraid of that what kind of questions would be asked and all that, because it is very difficult to say. Even if somebody says that it could have can have such kind of questions, or this kind of pattern might be followed from these areas, question will be more common. So these are all assumptions. You cannot predict that what kind of question would be asked, because this is not a university examination, or some final year examination or like that follows a kind of pattern year wise. But in this entrance examination, I don't see any possibility of having some set of questions which one can predict just by experience, unless until you face it for the first time at least. So that will give you true idea about the type of questions they have incorporated in this question paper. And moreover, it is not necessarily that if this year the pattern is something like this might change after a year or two. So that is not a fixed pattern. So I would rather suggest keep focus more on your studies and all that. The question, as I always say, can be framed from any sentence, any statement, from any chapter. Anything can be asked. So because entrance examination, PG entrance and etc. is not a test of measuring your clinical skills or how much fundamentals you know and all that. This is just a way to filter out candidates, so that they can take up the students which are those who are in merit list accordingly. So this is just a kind of filtration process. So this loses its kind of importance, that this particular things every student should know and all that philosophy is no more there actually. So I would just say, this is my sincere advice to all of you guys, that study well and focus on each and everything, and don't be carried away by the advices given by, because it is very easy to give advice. But if you are well prepared, I tell you, nobody can stop you. That is the crux of this all, But considering that this exam is very nearby, on 20th this month you are having this examination. So considering that, I thought to take up one question paper from JIPMER, because these are all combined now. So let us see what kind of question this JIPMER PG entrance usually asks. So I have included May 2019 question paper. So let us see, and let me discuss it with you with explanation. I'm Dr. Pramod Sharma. For those who are very first time watching me live on this live daily, NEET PG live daily. So I'm a super specialty by expertise with expertise in clinical pharmacology, and have done my MD and DM from PGI Chandigarh. Guys, let me remind you once again, this Telegram app, this is a kind of messenger app where you can receive messages and can send messages also. But here this app you need to download but and join this group where you cannot send messages. This is one way traffic. Only we or an academy member can send the message on this, educators and the academy member, and that is related to the class schedule and all that. And they can also share the link for particular lesson or video, etc. That is for your benefit. And you have beforehand the total timetable of the day, so you can take out some time for your from your busy schedule, because you're right now very much engaged in your studies and all that. But you can always take out time if you find something is being taught today that is important for you, in which you have some difficulties in that particular topic or in subject. And so you can always take out time and watch that session. And also many a time you guys have a specific inclination towards a particular educator. You may be like may have a special kind of you don't want to miss, you don't want to miss any class of that educator, so one of your favorite educator. So that way you are always informed well in advance, so that you can watch those lessons live. I don't know you are aware or not, but I keep reminding you guys that every time there is an app called Unacademy Learning app, which is is also important in the sense that this app, if you have on your system, you can watch special classes that are also absolutely free. So where will you get these much these many free services like NEET PG Live Daily, special classes? And I would suggest that though they are available only on NEET PG or this NEET Unacademy Learning app only, so you download it so that you can take advantage of this. I keep taking classes on special classes, YouTube Plus as well, everywhere I'm involved. So like today I have a special class, every alternate day, or sometimes when I feel that that information is always circulated before hand, because that message will go to you if you are on this app already. So this special classes, the advantage is that you have ample opportunity to interact with the educator. This is the advantage of this class. And not only that, if you actually follow the educator on this app, you can follow any educator, and then you can send any message, any query directly to the educator, and which educator will definitely reply back. So this is the advantage, and its interface is absolutely different from NEET PG channel on this YouTube. And it will give you some idea about how the NEET PG Plus will look like. So this is a kind of sense, will sensitize you about the NEET PG Plus as well. So this is I would suggest that you download it, you tell your friends, other also. So if possible, as many as people, if they can download and install it, they will always, this is their benefit, because they will all be benefited with this free service. But for those who want much more than these free services in terms of the guidance, the need based courses and all that, and more attention, personalized attention and focus on their how to address their weaknesses and all that, for them Unacademy has a different portal, that is NEET PG Plus. But this is a premium service, and which has much more facilities what other free courses offers to other courses offer to the learners. So this Plus particularly is a subscription based service for which you need to buy subscription to get access to it. So this subscription is available for 12 months and 24 months. As I have already told you that this 24 months is good for those who are little keen in getting PG seats in immediately after their completion of their internship and all that, so they can subscribe right from their final years, and that this will not only help in preparing their final exams, but also would help in cracking the PG entrance in the first go. That is what we expect to be very positive. We should not think negative. And this 12 month is also necessary, at least minimum period. This is necessary because this is the time you will at least require to get familiar with all the experts in this particular field, experts of different subjects of this MBBS, so that you do not only learn from these educator about the subject, but also imbibe lot many other qualities which you will realize that they were a real asset to have such qualities and all that. And moreover, they keep posting these educators keep posting the special courses on this NEET PG Plus portal, where you can attend many of them, and that is why I'm saying that 12 months is necessary, because at least you should have ample exposure to what exactly NEET PG Plus is doing for you. So it could not be judged within a month or two. It would require definitely a year. So to get familiar with the potential or the of this NEET PG Plus, how it can make you a better learner and improve your chances to score better in your exams and all that. And this subscription fee, if you look at, if you apply my code, this Dr. Pramod, you will get 10% discount on your subscription. And for 12 months it is amount is not this is I think a very petty amount, and if you apply a 10% discount, you will hardly need to pay 20,000. And for those I have discussed who need 24-month subscription, they can get it for roughly 25,000 only. So it's not a bad bargain. I would just being an expert and would suggest or recommend that you should in fact be on this platform to realize the actual potential of NEET PG Plus in your preparations. So these classes, these plus classes, have various qualities. For example, the live classes which you attend on this NEET PG Plus will give you a feel of being physically present in a class, because the number of learners are less, so the interaction between the students or the learners and the educator is quite frequent. And I personally feel that if you need to impart knowledge to the learners, then this real-time interaction between the teacher and the student is must. That makes any learning process more efficient and more fruitful. Other than that, we have live polls and leaderboard facilities. So that is also important. That you will rarely find on any free services or free platform. Moreover, the educators can give personalized attention and can address the weakness of a particular learner, because the number of students are less and they get more attention in terms of because the educator is capable of interacting with each another and can ask personally and address their issues. There are test series and analysis. Number of test series analysis are there. You can attempt them, and you can enhance your skills, your knowledge, your understanding, everything. This is why these series are there. So more you do, more you gain actually, because without pain there is no gain. So it's up to you. You need to genuinely invest your 100%, because no teacher, no platform can get you this seat, PG seat, that too in a good college without your individual efforts or personal efforts, because that is must. We can only guide, we can only provide resources, we can guide, we can put you on the right track, we can prevent you from getting deviated from your goal and path, and we can keep inculcating the or boost up your morale and all that can we do. But and wherever you feel difficulty in any area of this, any of the subject, that we can resolve. But ultimately it is you who has to answer this question and appear in the exam. So if you are you really done your best in your preparation during your preparation time, you will definitely come out with flying colors. Other than that, there is live doubt clearing session. It is the protocol within the protocol of Plus, that after every 3 lessons taken by a particular educator, he has to take a live doubt clearing session to clear any doubt if any learner is coming up with those issues, or so you have to resolve them to their satisfaction. So though you can always ask questions, any query, whatever during the live classes, but you can come across any kind of doubt or something that can be cleared in this doubt clearing sessions. Moreover, at many free sites you may not get notes, or many times it's difficult to download videos offline and all that. So here there is no problem, you can have everything downloaded and can watch them offline, or read your notes and all that, get them printed, everything. So that is a big gain in terms of having study material in hand. So that is all the plus features of this particular Unacademy subscription, and it is considered as one-stop solution that this Unacademy offers to its learners, so that they can derive maximum benefit out of it. And this is at present is the best learning platform as far as these entrance examinations are concerned. So I would suggest, being an expert, that you should be on this platform and harvest the maximum benefit, though you need to pay a little small amount, but that is worth spending on this kind of services. So let us start with the question papers. Wherever I feel is I differ from kind of answers options they have given, so that I will tell you, and otherwise I will keep explaining you as well. So the bile acid sequestrants decrease LDL and increase HDL by. This kind of questions, in fact, I don't think is right to ask, but these are very kind of they do not have short kind of answers. So though this bile acid sequestrant, I have already discussed about that. These bile acids are natural endogenous ligand of FXR receptor. These are these receptors are nuclear receptors. So free bile acids, conjugated bile acid can stimulate FXR receptors, and actually in stimulation of FXR receptor keeps the bile acid synthesis under control, as well as it promotes excretion. But these bile acid sequestrant actually binding the bile acids in the intestine do not allow them to get reabsorbed. So there is loss of bile acid in the feces. So there is decrease in overall cholesterol pool in the liver, and that actually leads to, because bile acids get decreased, so there is decreased activation of FXR receptors. So this somehow actually leads to increased synthesis of cholesterol by acting CYP7A1. This is an enzyme hydroxylase, 7-alpha hydroxylase. This actually leads to increased synthesis of bile acids. Other than that, there are other actions also which actually reduce LDL. This because there is reduced stimulation of PPR alpha receptors, because of the reduced activation of FXR, PPAR alpha. There is increase ApoC3, which actually delay the catabolism of triglyceride rich protein, decrease in ApoC2, which is a cofactor for lipoprotein lipase enzyme. Also there is decrease in VLDL receptors. So these all lead to decrease in this thing, LDL ultimately. VLDL production, VLDL ultimately, all LDL is derived from VLDL ultimately. And HDL is increased because of there is an increase in 1A1 ApoA1, that increases your HDL. HDL effect is because of this. Otherwise bile acid sequestrant are mainly help in reducing LDL, but they can also raise triglyceride. They may raise triglyceride, and if you look at then they are usually used in combination with bile acid statins, but when there is a intolerability or intolerance to statins, then we can use them alone also. And they can decrease various agents are there like cholestyramine and cholestyramine. They can at lower doses they can reduce up to 12 to 18% of LDL, but maximum dose can reduce it to up to 25%. But colesevelam is a new drug which is in comparison to them that can maximum reduction is 18% only, right? So maximum they can decrease up to 25%, but at high maximum doses the side effects are very unacceptable. So they are mainly used in combination with hardly used as monotherapy only in case of, as I said, the statin intolerance and all that. So if you see the answer close to, and they increase HDL by 3 to 5%, that is not a direct effect but indirectly by increasing ApoA1. So if you go by that, the nearest figure comes to, because they're 18% to 25%, so we can go by this. So answer A is the closest to the answer which should be there actually. Okay. PPI, proton pump inhibitor, not used for GERD, stress ulcer, Barrett's esophagus, and acid induced ulcer. PPIs are proton pump inhibitors. Proton pump inhibitors, these are all diseases which are because of the increased acid production and all that. This GERD is gastroesophageal reflux disease, stress ulcer or erosive gastritis and all that. These are all kind of stress ulcer. Barrett's esophagus is a condition where there is, because of increase this acid reflux and all that, the lower part of the esophagus may undergo metaplastic and then dysplastic changes, and ultimately carcinomatous changes may occur, and NSAID induced ulcer. So this question is not used for, I don't find any correct answer, because the Barrett's esophagus is not also a approved indication of PPI, but it is also managed like GERD just to reduce acidity and all that. NSAID induced ulcer, it is, yes, PPIs are approved, GERD approved. Stress ulcer, they say using PPI may increase the risk of Clostridium difficile infection in hospitalized patient and all that, but still they are used as first line drugs for prophylaxis of stress ulcer and all that. So this is something which I don't think such questions should be framed, because there is no clear-cut answer. So this is just to make a student a little apprehensive, or little put them in a difficult situation. What should be the answer and all. And many a time a student might leave such a question, though he knows lot about PPIs and all that, but because of this confusing choices and all that, so I would request simply that such questions should be avoided. In my opinion, it can be used in all. There is no, I think there is nothing wrong in using all the situations. So this is I don't find any perfect answer for this. So you can go by there is no condition where they cannot be used. So all are correct in my opinion. In all can be used. So such questions are not good, I think. Half-life of basiliximab. This question itself is incomplete because basiliximab is a drug which can be used in children or adults and all that. So it should be specified half-life in a pediatric population or the adults means this is also important because it has variable half-life in different age group. Like it has around 6.2 hours in adults and 9.1 hours or 9 hours around in adolescent, 9.5 hours in children. All this, so this question itself is incomplete, but despite that, this question is okay. This basiliximab is nothing but is a chimeric monoclonal antibodies against IL-2 receptor that are present on the activated T lymphocytes. So that is also called CD25. So it binds to the alpha subunit of the CD25, that receptors, and inhibit the release of IL-2 and means activation by the IL-2 and all that. So this is best used in the prevention or prophylaxis of rejection of the cardiac, renal, or this hepatic transplant and all that, because this basiliximab is one of the important immunosuppressive kind of agent which is used for this. IL-2 is very important in immunological role. And similar molecule is also there, that is called daclizumab. This is also a CD25 antagonist, monoclonal antagonist, and it has half-life around 20 days in adult and 13 days in pediatric population. So here the answer is 7 days is the correct answer. So I think this is sufficient for you. I have explained. So you can very well imagine, can you imagine that even the half-life can be asked? So you cannot say that something is important. See, half-life, how can you remember half-life of everything? There are certain areas where you should have idea about half-life in certain situations. Is it possible to? There are thousands of drugs. Can you remember half-life of everything? But for this is not a test of measuring your clinical acumen or your how do you think about, or what is your approach towards the patient, how do you handle drugs and all that. This is not the actually idea behind this entrance examination. This is a kind of filtration exam where they need to take out some students who are there on the top 1,000, 5,000, 2,000, depending upon the number of seats. So you cannot expect that they'll ask something which is clinically more relevant or something like that. Moreover, I have told you that questions are actually picked up from the randomly from the data bank, and that nobody can say, because they keep feeding questions every year in this data bank, and they just take out things randomly, because I prepare questions for DNB and all that. So they actually put that in data bank, and from there it is randomly selected. It is not that this year I have framed so many questions, so these questions will be asked. No, it's not like that, right? According to CPE ranking, this is a good question for ART, that is antiretroviral therapy drug. Best penetration to CNS is by which rank? The CPE is CNS penetration effectiveness, and this is a tool to quantify the entry of this antiretroviral drug in the CNS, because it is correlated with the more the concentration in the CSF, more better reduction in the viral count in the CSF. And this tool was updated very latest in 2010. After that I didn't find anything newer to that or subsequent to that actually this ranking. And considering that it has been divided into 1 to 4, and they say the 4 is the best, the drug which attains maximum concentration in CSF is given the ranking of 4. So ranking are from 1 to 4. 5, 6, 7 they are just misleading. They are what we call them that actually deviate your mind from the correct question. So there is a term for these choices as such, these are just to misguide you, in fact. So answer here should be the 4. And here the CNS activity may not correlate with the efficacy of the particular regimen in systemic area. So this is there may be a disconnect between these two. So one should remember this. This is only about CNS or CNS action and all that. Decreased expression of nuclear factor kappa B is seen with. This nuclear factor kappa B is considered as father of genome. I think I have read somewhere. It is very important in anywhere in inflammatory conditions and all that. So this NF kappa B is expression is reduced. If we see choices one by one, the most correct answer is this steroid intake, because steroids have two kind of action. They called glucocorticoid receptor induced transactivation and transrepression. So this decrease is in this expression of NF kappa B is an example of GR induced transrepression. What happened? Steroid does nothing. They just, because these are all nuclear factor or transcription factors. Other than that, AP1, activated protein 1, STAT5, signal of transduction and activator of transcription, right? So these are all transcription factor which are actually inhibited by steroids. They come in contact. The steroid ultimately actually leads to deacetylation of these activated transcription factor and all that, and result in failure of transcription of certain genes by these transcription factors. So this is most important. Calcineurin inhibitors have different mode of action. Actually, there are immunosuppressive class of drug like cyclosporin and tacrolimus, etc. Tacrolimus, these actually binds to immunophilins. There are proteins inside the cell, immunophilins. So in case of cyclosporin, they are called cyclophilin, and or tacrolimus, they are called FK binding protein 12. So the cyclophilin immunophilins, they bind to these calcineurins actually. So calcineurin is nothing but an enzyme. This is a phosphatase enzyme. Phosphokinase these are phosphatase. They can remove phosphate group. They involved in dephosphorylation. So if they are activated, they can lead to dephosphorylation of NF80. So calcineurin inhibitors inhibit this enzyme, like the cyclosporin, tacrolimus. Otherwise, what will happen? The dephosphorylation of NF80 can occur. Nuclear factor of activated transcription. Then if it is dephosphorylated, it can enter the nucleus and can lead to increased production of IL-2, gene overexpression IL-2 from the T lymphocytes. So this is actually inhibited by calcineurin inhibitor. Rifampicin acts by a different mechanism. This acts by inhibiting alpha subunit of beta subunit of DNA dependent RNA polymerase, so thereby decreasing RNA synthesis in the bacteria. And antimetabolites are usually anti-cancer agents, and they are used as immunosuppressive in many other conditions, autoimmune disease also. They usually interfere with all cellular mechanisms that actually are involved in DNA synthesis. So we have many such drugs, like you can have this capecitabine and 5-fluorouracil. These act actually through thymidylate synthase. They inhibit thymidylate synthase. Thymidylate is important for DNA synthesis and all that. Methotrexate and pemetrexate leads to inhibition of DHF, dihydrofolate reductase, and thymidylate synthase also. And other than that, we have other drugs which inhibit this antimetabolites like cytarabine, gemcitabine, and fludarabine, Cladarabine. So they are all cladarabine. They inhibit ribonucleose reductase. Thereby, they can all affect DNA synthesis and all that. That ultimately leads to cell death and all that. So used in cancer therapy and many autoimmune disease and etc. So got it. So answer here is steroid intake. Which of the following is immunomodulator and anti-inflammatory? This is a very tricky question, and this is also, I told you, this question is also should have not been there actually. This is also very confusing because if you ask me, all of them can have they have been demonstrated to have some immunomodulator anti-inflammatory activity in one or other condition. In many of them are in skin conditions. Tetracycline is very well known for immunomodulator, anti-inflammatory. Macrolides are also, beta-lactams, are fluoroquinolones, all are there. So I don't find any correct answer in that because all can have this immunomodulator anti-inflammatory activity. So for for me, all have all are correct. So such questions should be, these are the questions which are actually framed by young, more enthusiastic, question setters. This shows their immaturity and all that. One should be very clear in their, should have a clear conscience that there should not be any question which actually make a lot of student confused and all that. Suppose you leave this question, then despite knowing this, you miss certain numbers. If you try and they have fed some particular answer like B or C or A, you will lose, you will get negative marks. So this is this should be avoided. This kind of questions should not be framed at all. Either may not be having, maybe going through some literature and he did not read the entire literature, got something first few lines and just, this should be the can be framed as a question. So one should be little aware of this kind of thing. You should have complete information about the possible answers of this question which you have framed. You should be 100 times sure that there should not be any alternative answer to this, because this put students in difficulties. Staph resistance to penicillin with the help of which gene? Question line, I think these are all, So the answer here is this MECA gene. That is the correct answer, because this actually is responsible for methicillin resistance. And it is chromosomally mediated. This methicillin resistance, usually the penicillin, when it was found out that this penicillin enzyme is there which actually degrade penicillin, it was found there is some other mechanism also which can actually decrease the activity of the penicillin. That was found to be methicillin resistance, this particular gene. And this resistance is more, have a broader effect. It can develop, maybe responsible for development of resistance against not only penicillin, cephalosporin, carbapenems also. But this penicillinase has narrow spectrum, kind of resistance it can lead to. So this MECA gene is important, methicillin resistance. And MRSA, these MRSAs are really going to be a very dangerous bacteria which hardly respond to many those drugs which are available for MRSA. They are also gradually losing their efficacy and all that because of misuse and all that. So the answer here is MECA gene. All of the following are sensitive to colistin except this. Colistin is a toxic antibiotic, but it is very important in case of gram-negative infection. This is also known as polymyxin, or we call it polymyxin E, I think. Yes, colistin is also known as polymyxin. It is having more activity against gram-negative. Like we have, bacitracin, that is having mainly gram-positive action. So this is active against Pseudomonas, Acinetobacter, right? Klebsiella, which is from Enterobacteriaceae family, against that, Bordetella, all that. So this drug is very active against these agents, even Pseudomonas, and it is available both in all form. Like it can be given orally, or it has topically available, and injectable also, and it is available as an inhalational also. In case of, I think it is given in cystic fibrosis and all that. So this is important agent, and resistance is rare against this particular antibiotic. So this is a very promising, though very old drug, but very promising. But this is where it is not active against this Burkholderia, which is actually responds to trimethoprim, sulfamethoxazole, and meropenem, and can minocycline, and can respond to many antibiotics, cefepime. So this Burkholderia is actually not sensitive to the colistin. This is insensitive, and colistin is also not active against anaerobes, not active against gram negative, gram positive, aerobic cocci, or aerobic aerobic gram negative cocci, and this anaerobes, against anaerobes, gram positive and gram negative, aerobic cocci, and active against these bacilli, especially this, right, aerobic bacilli. Not active against non-aerobic bacilli also. Which of the following increases defibrillation threshold? Defibrillation threshold is mainly used because nowadays it is very common to undergo implantable cardioverter defibrillator ICD devices, right? Because those who are more likely to have arrhythmia anytime, so they have implantable device that can detect abnormal rhythm and can send a current and can suppress this the kind of defibrillation that is in situ. So this is the amount of energy which is required to reliably suppress any or achieve defibrillation in a particular patient. So maybe this is the threshold which is used, or this energy output is set in these devices for individual patient, and this is actually has been shown to be affected by the various drugs. For example, here they are asking which of the following increases defibrillation threshold. So the amiodarone increases the threshold. These are the questions also which are out of the not in the MBBS level, these questions. This amiodarone actually increases. Other than that, I think this cocaine can increase. Lidocaine can increase, morphine can increase, mexilatin can increase. There are reports, and sotalol and other beta blockers, they actually decrease this threshold. So the correct answer here is amiodarone. But this question is definitely can be classified as a very tough question. Epileptic abnormality in EEG seen with all except. Here the answer, if you see cefepime, that is a cephalosporin. In fact, the beta-lactam ring itself is responsible for epileptiform. Many a time, I think in many animal models, the application of penicillin on the brain can result in epilepsy and all that. The cefepime can have this kind of activity. Fluoxetine and doxepin has been found in some studies to increase, can lead to this epileptiform kind of activity. And methylphenidate, it is supposed that the CNS stimulator kind of thing can reduce seizure threshold and all that, and they are contraindicated in those who have seizure activity and all that usually. So doxycycline should be the correct answer. But this is also a question which is considered as very difficult question because this fall under the category of difficult. I was saying that other choices which are not correct are called distractors, just to distract you from the right answer. And distractors should be such that make me confuse you. It should not be unambiguously different, that you can simply put them aside. No, this cannot be the answer. They should be very matching kind of thing, so that you are more and more confused. So this question is also little outside the and fluoroquinolones are also well known for causing seizure activity and all that, because of the interference with the activity of GABA and all that. Though this fluoxetine really, because SSRI is usually considered as a very safe drug as far as antidepressant drugs are involved. Which of the following is not a side effect or not a side effect? First of all, this not, except, these things are I don't like, and there are clear cut directions while you are framing questions, that you should not start or have a question with negative stem. This is ridiculous. Even such a prestigious institute having questions like that, and they are actually responsible for framing. In medical education, JIPMER is framing guidelines for all these things, how to make questions and all that. So not a side effect of fluoroquinolones. So we very well know that gatifloxacin is actually withdrawn from the market because of these effects. Dysglycemia, it can cause hypoglycemia or hyperglycemia, so this is not available for oral use. This is systemic use is withdrawn. That can be present in topical use like eye drops, etc. That is there. And decreased liver enzyme. In fact, fluoroquinolones quite often mild increase in transaminases. And this is also a very rare question. This effect you will find in literature, means if you search journals and all that, you will hardly find this in textbook and all that. And that is an MBBS student, you can't expect him to have, but it is good that this liver enzyme is decreased liver enzyme. There can never be anything which can be decreased. Means something decrease means hemoglobin can decrease, this can decrease, but liver enzyme can decrease, this cannot happen. This is something, so one can make out if somebody has little presence of mind, he can, without knowing anything, he can tick answer D, right? He has not to get into any nitty-gritties of these questions and all that. Simply he will tick D, because decreased liver enzyme cannot be there. So increased risk of bleeding is there. Yes, these fluoroquinolones have been incriminated in certain side effects, like serious, very rare but serious, like they can lead to rupture or tear in the large blood vessels like aorta and all that, can result in dissection. So indirectly the bleeding, means they wanted to say it like this is. But otherwise, increased bleeding, people will think in the way that they are interfering with the coagulation pathway or something like that. So this is also little, I am not impressed with this question. Okay, but answer is decreased liver enzyme. Resistance to tetracycline is by efflux, overexpression, modification, mutation. First of all, the question has not mentioned most commonly by. Many a time, actually in this, all the processes, almost everything is involved in the resistance process with all antibiotics. Very hardly there may be some difference, otherwise all mechanisms are operating maybe in the lower extent or the higher extent or to the larger extent, but it should be the most commonly by, and then you can find out, yes, this is the answer. The efflux is, yes, most common time is efflux is important, and this is actually because of the TET gene, activation of TET gene. And other than that, there is ribosomal protection is also provided by against tetracycline. So that is also important mechanism of inducing resistance against tetracycline in case of other than influx. That is, I think, through methylation of ribosomal site by inducible or constitutive methylase enzyme and all that. So that is one of the other mechanism which is quite rampant in tetracycline resistance and all that. Category X drug used by FDA in pregnancy is this is also a ridiculous question, because the choices are such that I don't think that such a question should be framed. It should be clear cut. If you are, this question is such a clear cut answer, should have a clear cut answer, that there should not be at all any confusion. Category X drugs, you know what drug should fall into. You are giving thalidomide, isotretinoin. Everybody knows these two drugs are to be avoided during pregnancy. But let me tell you, the answer, there are two answers. But up to 2017, this misoprostol was also category X. Can you believe this? But after that, it has been actually, its category has been changed by FDA revision in 2017. So this has been removed from the category X drugs. Otherwise, this was also considered as category X. Cyclophosphamide, yes, it is category D drug. So this is ridiculous. Why such a question? I don't know. Maybe these questions may be based on whether they provide question paper or not, or they're just they provided by the students. Means they recalled it, because I got it from some books and all that. So maybe because of that, I should not in fact comment that the institute has provided such question. Maybe because of this wrong information or wrong recall by the students who actually provided these questions to these publisher or some this publisher of the books and all. So the answer is here, the two answers are there, isotretinoin and thalidomide. Acetylcholine receptor subunits are. This is a good question, and I, in fact, when I taught, I gave a good account of this receptor subunit and all that, because this is important. And in many books, things are not very clearly, they are pentameric units. These are ligand gated ion channels, and they are present in the muscles, skeletal muscles, where they are called NM receptors, and they are present in neuronal receptors that are present in ganglion and CNS, right? Though they are pentameric, but they here also they have not cleared that acetylcholine receptor subunits where. Because if you see at the skeletal muscles, then they have 5 units, 5 different subunits. Otherwise, neuronal ones have only 2 subunits, alpha and beta. So this question is also incomplete. For example, we have in skeletal muscles, if you see, we have alpha 1 variety, right? This is present as alpha 1 is present as 2. They are 2 subunits of alpha 2. They are 2. And beta, delta, epsilon. But in fetal kind of, that there is gamma, and in many books you will find in adult this skeletal muscle receptor subunit gamma. That is correct, not correct. Actually, it is replaced by adult in post-fetal life by epsilon actually. So this alpha are 2 units and baki rest are 1 unit. So there's pentameric structure. Here you have 4 different subunits. So this is the right answer if you consider it as a skeletal muscle subunit. But in neuronal, if you have ganglion and if you have CNS, in CNS you have alpha 2, beta 2, beta 2, there are 3 units, and this is alpha 4, 2 units. They are also pentameric, but only have 2 subunits. And ganglion have alpha 3, alpha 5 and beta 2, 3 units. So these are actually made up of only 2 subunits. So this is also incomplete. So this should be acetylcholine receptor subunits in skeletal muscles receptors. Then this could be the answer. Got my point? So I don't understand how this kind of they publishers also don't look about all these things. Which of the following is contraindicated in ESRD? Dabigatran is the answer. Why? Because it is actually mainly eliminated by kidney, and it is a direct thrombin inhibitor, which is orally active direct thrombin inhibitor. This is also known as DOAC or NOAC, near oral active anticoagulant or direct oral anticoagulants. Other than that, there are factor Xa inhibitors included in this category, like apixaban, rivaroxaban and edoxaban. So dabigatran is actually supposed to reduced in dosage when there is creatinine clearance is less than 30, but creatinine clearance less than 15, there is no information, but below this it should be adjusted. ESRD means, this is stage 5. ESRD is stage 6 year of failure, even less than this. So I don't know what they wanted to say ESRD, right? So okay, it is contraindicated in ESRD. Apixaban is contraindicated, have different this thing. This if a patient has age more than 80 or weight less than 60 kg or have creatinine level more than 1.5 milligram, if any two of is there, then the dose should be halved. Rivaroxaban, if there is creatinine clearance is less than 50 but more than 15, then it can be reduced from 20 to 15 milligram. But edoxaban is something different. If we have creatinine clearance more than 95 ml per minute, as it is contraindicated in patient with stroke prophylaxis, because it has caused more stroke than the warfarin. So it is contraindicated in that. This is very unusual. So here correct answer is A. Which of the following has least risk of developing myopathy with statins? This is a good question, I would rather say, but it is out of the MBBS standard, and you will not really find this information in books unless until you go and read any extensive review in scientific literature and all that. This is otherwise you will not find in any textbook, even the which is considered as a reference textbooks like Goodman Gilman, that also do not have this information. And I, when took class, I didn't discuss about this because it was not there, and I never thought of this, that such question can be asked. So it is least risk of developing myopathy with statin is male sex. It is not there that it will not develop male sex. It is a least risk. Females are more commonly involved. Females have higher predilection. Small body volume, no problem. Will develop definitely higher risk. And kidney disease, yes. Alcoholism, yes. Other than that, increased exercise, many drugs which can inhibit their metabolism and all that, and there are many factors that has been actually added to this. So this is male sex which is more commonly involved than the least risk, I'm saying, So you should know this: kidney and liver disease, alcoholism, small body volume, females, and the increased exercise to exercising individuals. All they can develop higher risk of myopathy with statins. Or many drugs like nicotinic acid, gemfibrozil, cyclosporin, And many drugs, the CYP3 inhibitors, especially for those statins which are metabolized by CYP3A4, like atorvastatin, lovastatin, simvastatin, and all that. CYP4 interaction is seen with itraconazole, lovastatin. Many of the spellings where only God can save them. The publisher has published what word they published, I don't know, but I thought that it could be many words. Phenobarbital was not there, ezetimibe, something else was written. I thought of correcting them. So CYP4 interaction is seen with cholesterol is not absorbed, is not metabolized, so no problem. So there will be no interaction. Ezetimibe is also actually is not related to that. Ezetimibe is glucuronide conjugation occurs, so not a problem. Fenofibrate, ezetimibe, not a problem at all. It is the itraconazole and lovastatin, because lovastatin is metabolized by CYP3A4. And itraconazoles, especially these azoles, antifungal azoles, they are very known potent inhibitor of CYP3A4. Itraconazole, voriconazole, ketoconazole, not fluconazole, rarely fluconazole, and also these macrolide antibiotics, clarithromycin, clarithromycin and erythromycin, they are very potent CYP3A4 inhibitors. So, and lovastatin, I said atorva, lova, and simvastatins, but simva, atorva, they are here mixed with some agent which are not at all affect atorvastatin, and these concentrations. Because they do not have any effect on CYP enzymes. Least side effect is seen with. This is also very vague type of questions. How can you say least side effects or something? There is nothing called least side effect or something like that, because it can vary from individual to individual. But in case these are all can be used as antidepressant, they are these class 100. First is tricyclic antidepressant. Okay, tricyclic antidepressants are usually having higher toxicity because they have anticholinergic action and they can have cardiac toxicity and cardiotoxicity. Serotonin modulator, SSRIs, are considered as actually first line drugs. They usually have lesser side effects, but they are not devoid of side effects, and many a times a particular one agent may not be tolerated, then you have to shift another molecule from the same class. Monooxidase inhibitor, because of these serotonin syndrome, risk of serotonin syndrome, hypertensive crisis and all that, less preferred because they are very less preferred. SNRI, especially the serotonin noradrenergic receptor reuptake inhibitor, These SNRIs, venlafaxine, desvenlafaxine, duloxetine, milnacipran, levomilnacipran. They have similar side effect but little more than SSRIs. We can choose B as an answer, but I am also not happy with this kind of question. Least side effect is seen with that. There is nothing least. Least means this drug is absolutely safe, do not have any or maybe very sporadic cases of 1 or 2 cases out of a million or 1 in 1 lakh or something like that, then or that too very non-significant side of this. SSRIs are non-significant, side effects are not there. There are side effects. So but in comparison to these, we can consider some because they are considered as first line drugs. So that can hint that answer should be this. Which of the following is associated with sexual dysfunction? This is also very, we know we never talk about this sexual dysfunction while discussing these drugs. They are very clearly either associated with androgen receptor antagonist or 5-alpha reductase inhibitor, or with spironolactone or other these diuretics, etc. We very well know this, which can cause gynecomastia or erectile dysfunction and all that. But in such drugs, this is very kind of difficult. But L-thyroxine, in fact, will improve because hypothyroidism may be associated with sexual dysfunction, but that is related to disease. So L-thyroxine should not, because it improves symptoms of that. Antihistamines, when you search the literature, you will find many drugs like diphenhydramine, dimenhydrinate, promethazine, meclizine. These kind of drugs are associated with sexual dysfunction. So this is a difficult question. No such association with glargine or leukotriene receptor antagonist have been found. So antihistamines, let's see, you can at least solve these 26 questions. You can see answer, because maybe any one or two question might be there from this, because if they picked up ask take question bank from all this institute and mix them up, maybe randomly such a question may be there. So at least you can solve these 26 questions. Maybe if you are lucky enough, you might get one or two. That is also good. All are true about artemisinin derivative, except, again this except, this negative stem should not be, falciparum is mostly resistant, artemether or artesunate. Mechanism of action, endoplasmic reticulum damage, contraindicated in pregnancy. Okay, artemether or artesunates are, yes, they are artemisinin derivatives. Falciparum is mostly resistance. Actually this artemisinin derivatives was being used in monotherapy, and that was leading to development of resistance. But now the policy has been made this artemisinin derivatives to be used only in combination, that is artemisinin based combination therapy, ACT. So artemether is available with lumefantrine, artesunate is available with sulfadoxine, pyrimethamine, etc. So, and mechanism of action is endoplasmic reticulum damage. Yes, their endoperoxides react with heme iron of the parasite and forms many free radicals, and that damages the bacterial parasitic walls and all that. So this is there. Contraindicated in pregnancy, this is also incomplete statement, contraindicated in pregnancy, but I can take it, not a problem, because first trimester of pregnancy it is contraindicated, can be given in second and third this thing. So mostly resistant, this we cannot actually consider, because usually these drugs are added with a long acting drug which actually afford cure. These drugs are, these artemisinin derivatives are usually to decrease the parasitic load as early as possible. So during first 3 days they reduce the parasitic load, and the cure is actually achieved by the another partner in the combination, that is little longer acting agent. So this falciparum is mostly resistant, that is should be the correct answer, because they use except, this I don't like. Anti-epileptic drug causing diplopia. I searched a book. Yes, this is very well known with carbamazepine. I was aware of. I was not aware of with gabapentin. But literature suggests that it is also with gabapentin. This is also correct answer. Carbamazepine is the right answer. This carbamazepine, it can lead to you can say this ataxia and all that. Is this also the side effect? It means cerebellar activity. So this diplopia may be because of cerebellum has control on this conjugate movement of eyes and all that maybe. And other than that, there is azogabine. This drug is also causing this is also known as retigabine or something like in Europe. This is American name. This can also lead to diplopia. So here the C and D are the two answers which fits into causing diplopia. Not only that, this azogabine can cause I think color vision can be affected, I think, and can lead to retinal toxicity as well. Bedaquiline, all are true except, again this except, I don't understand this. Causes QT prolongation. Yes, this is an issue with this bedaquiline because it has been associated with there are reports that it can lead to QT prolongation. Used in MDR-TV. Yes, this is used in MDR-TM, but data on XDR-TB is very scarce, and you cannot say that it is a definite treatment in XDR-TB and all that. Inhibit cell wall. No, this is not inhibit cell wall synthesis. Inhibitor is not the answer. It is actually, it blocks the ATP synthase. That is the mechanism of action. So this is the let me correct answer. Can penetrate, and this bedaquiline poorly penetrate actually CNS, but I can take it because it can penetrate, though poorly, but it can penetrate. It is not there, it is excluded from the CNS. It is not at all allowed to enter in the CNS, but poorly penetrate. So this XDR is doubtful, and this is also not a complete statement, and this except I do not like, but here the answer is C. Dose of fosfomycin in a 40 years old female is. The fosfomycin is a good drug for UTI infection, especially the uncomplicated infection, and it is a cell wall synthesis inhibitor. I think it block some enzyme, that is enol pyrovyl transferase or something like that, and it is given in a fixed dose, like 3 gram dose actually, in uncomplicated your single dose 3 gram, but it has been approved by US FDA for multi drug resistance UTI. You can give it 2 to 3 gram every 2 to 3 days for 3 doses. Some people are also using it for prophylaxis, this suppression, that is or means UTI prophylaxis, so they are giving 3 gram every 10 days, but this is not the approved indication of the FDA, but yes, this 3 gram in uncomplicated in UTI, as well as this 3 doses in multi drug resistance UTI. This is these are the both these two are the licensed indication of fosfomycin in US, and some can use off label for every 10 days for suppression of or prophylaxis of repeated infection. A 50-year male with calcium oxalate stone with hypertension, choice of hypertensive is calcium oxalate stone. Calcium has poor water solubility, and especially if urine is alkaline, there will be more precipitation of calcium and all that. So it is calcium oxalate stone. The patient, because of any reason, is excreting, maybe because of hyperparathyroidism, excreting more calcium in the urine. So because of excessive concentration, that may precipitate because of poor solubility, and that leads to increased calcium formation. So we can take care of this with thiazide diuretics. Actually, thiazide diuretics decreases calcium excretion, calcium loss. This is not because this is because of it enhances the passive calcium reabsorption in PCT, proximal convoluted tubule, and furosemide actually leads to increased calcium loss. So it will cause hypercalciuria. So that is not required, because if more calcium is excreted in the urine, there are more chances of stone formation. So here purpose is to reduce calcium excretion, so that stone cannot be formed. And but furosemide also leads to calcium this calcium loss because of action in the distal convoluted tubule, thick ascending loop of Henle, because of the positive intraluminal potential action, the potential difference. Because of that, this calcium and magnesiums are lost, because of this increased intraluminal potential difference. These calcium and magnesium are absorbed through the paracellular pathway. So because of the blockade of this NKCC2 transporter by furosemide, this does not occur, and there is loss of calcium and magnesium. However, this thiazide also leads to magnesium loss, but that is because of different reason. That is inhibition of the TRPM6, transient receptor potential subfamily M, member 6. Member 6, yes, through that. So chlorthalidone is a thiazide diuretics and very commonly used in hypertension also. So this is a good question. The answer is chlorthalidone. Plerixafor is a relatively new drug, is used in this Plerixafor is a drug which is used to stimulate, mobilize stem cells. Otherwise we had GM-CSF, G-CSF. G-CSF is more so it is used for mobilization of stem cells and used in patient of multiple myeloma and other this what is that one other condition in which Hodgkin's, I think, to this mobilization of stem cells from the bone marrow to peripheral circulation. So especially in these patient, multiple myeloma patient who actually fail to show sufficient response with the G-CSF alone, so that it can be combined with the Plerixafor. And this Plerixafor is nothing but CXCR inhibitor 4 inhibitor. This is a receptor for which there is a agonist called CXCL12, I think, or we can say SDF1 alpha, stromal cell derived factor 1 alpha, that actually binds to this receptors and leads to homing of these stem cells, that these are CD34 positive cells, to the bone marrow. So once you use this with Plerixafor, there is an increased population of CD34 plus cells in the peripheral circulation and can be used for stem cell transplant and all that. So this Plerixafor is a relatively new drug and can be used in multiple myeloma. Statins utilize coisoenzyme 3A4 except, again this except I am not so I told you this ALS, or remember these are actually mainly CYP3A4. Rosuvastatin is also synthesized, but very small quantities metabolized. I think that is for 2C9. Other than that, I think fluvastatin is very more completely metabolized by CYP2C9, and pravastatins are not metabolized or very minimally negligibly metabolized and all that. So this is lovastatin. So you can see any kind of question can be asked. You can be asked which enzyme is responsible, this and that, what is the half-life and that. So one should be very prepared that any sort of question can be asked. Maybe it is clinically relevant or not, that so these are all 26 questions from JIPMER question paper May 2019. And I hope this if you are lucky enough, you might get one or two questions, similar question in your exams, any of the PG exams. There are many, though this is I just took this class considering this this ANICET, and that is very nearby, I think on 20th. So this is all about these 26 questions. Again guys, I'll remind you, this Telegram app, unless until you are there on this join this group, I will not I will keep reminding you. This is my duty and this is your responsibility to listen to me and be on this platform, so that you have information about daily classes and all that. So the timetable, if you have with you beforehand, that is always going to help you to attend classes. You should, that you do not miss out something which you. And guys, if you do not have this learning app, please download it and install it immediately, because this can make you available some special classes that are also absolutely free, and where you can interact with educator. This is what the best part of this platform, this special classes. And if you follow the educator, you can send direct messages which you will be if any query, that will be answered definitely. And you can also like I take classes on special classes also, so you can always attend my classes. If you really like my classes, I am available on all the platforms like Plus, special classes, and YouTube. So this is I will tell you that get it installed on your system and tell others also. this news should be made viral so that each and everybody gets benefited by. Other than that, there is a premium service where you get other facilities which are not available on free classes, but that is on subscription basis. That is called NEET PG Plus, and that subscription is available for 12 months and 24 months. I have already explained 24 months is the good for those who are in final year students. They can always and those who are can also buy this subscription, who are thinking of that they might take more time to prepare and all that for them, but I don't give such a negative advice. But 12 months is definitely essential for you to have to get familiarized with the way an educator teaches and the different courses which are actually being hosted by these educators from different specialty on this NEET PG Plus. So you get much more and more exposure, and you can do better in your exams. And if you see, the fee which is being charged for this subscription is not very hefty. These are reasonable amount for like 12 months. If you apply my this referral code, you will get a 10% discount. So this will be 20,000, and this 24 months, those who are willing to join for 24 months is around 25,000. So this is not a big deal, I think, and not a bad bargain as well. So, and you can pay as per your convenience. There is no different modes of payment have been provided, facilities have been provided. And once again I remind you that use this referral code Dr. Pramod and avail 10% discount. Anytime if you have made up your mind, you can use this code, right? And these are the specific reasons why I'm recommending you the to have subscription for NEET PG Plus, because these facilities you will not get anywhere else on any free platform. And you have everything available here, like the frequent interaction with the educators, doubt clearing sessions, and the test series analysis. They are really of a standard, and you can if you solve them, you will definitely have better outcome in your exam results and all that. And offline access, you can have anything download. You can download anything and can read them offline, or can watch those videos offline. So this is a one-stop solution for all of you guys. And Unacademy has actually created it keeping in mind that this is the best the Unacademy can offer to its learners, and so that they don't have to go anywhere else. So I would just recommend and suggest you to join this NEET PG Plus. But anyway, you keep enjoying this NEET PG Live Daily. If you subscribed it, then be with this on this watch every lesson on this channel, because this will help you. And ask other friends also to subscribe this channel, as well as you can share link of this NEET PG Live Daily to your friends and all that. And if you have really liked my class, you can give me a thumbs up, so that this is one of the way to give a return gift or kind of thing to your educator. So share it, make it viral. As many as people are there on this platform, so it's always good, because this is our aim to make it available to maximum of the individuals who actually need it. So this is all about today's class, and with this I'll take your leave. Okay, thank you, bye and good night.